A gatehouse was never built to welcome you. It was built to stop you. Think about what you're actually looking at. Two towers, pushed close together so a single man could hold the gap between them. A portcullis, a grille of iron-shod oak that dropped from a slot in the ceiling and could pin an intruder where he stood. Slits in the stone at eye height, cut narrow on the outside and wide on the inside, so an archer could see you long before you could ever see him. And above the entrance passage, holes in the vaulting. Murder holes. For pouring down whatever would end a siege. Every one of these was designed by people who genuinely expected an army. So here is the strange part. Walk up to 10 of them in England today and knock. Someone answers. A family. A kettle on somewhere behind them, a dog barking further in, coats hung on a peg beside a door that has been closed against the dark for 600 years. These gates went up before the Tudors, before Bosworth, before there was a Henry VII to be crowned, and people still live behind them. We are not stopping at the gate for a photograph, we are going through it. 10. Rockingham Castle, Northamptonshire. Stand at the bottom of the hill and look up, and the first thing you meet isn't a house at all. It's the gate. Two round towers, D-shaped, blunt-fronted, joined over a dark arch. And if you know what you're reading, you can see the violence still built into them. There's the slot where the portcullis ran. There are the arrow loops. There, set back under the arch, are the grooves for a second door, so that even a man who broke the first was trapped in the passage with the ceiling above him. This gatehouse was raised in 1270, in the reign of Henry III. That is 30 years before William Wallace, 2 full centuries before the Wars of the Roses ended on a field 20 miles from here. The site is older still. William the Conqueror himself ordered the first castle thrown up on this ridge, a mound and a wooden palisade, because from up here you can see the whole Welland Valley and anyone moving through it. For 4.5 centuries after that, this was a royal castle, a hunting lodge for kings who came to chase deer and wild boar through Rockingham Forest. King John held court here. Edward I. You were looking at a gate that medieval monarchs rode through with hounds and horses. And then, quietly, it stopped being the crown's and started being a home. A man named Edward Watson took the place on in the 15th century and began turning a cold royal fortress into somewhere a family could actually live. His descendants, the Watsons and their heirs, the Saunders-Watson family, are still here. Still inside these walls, today, this year. Push through that 1270 gateway and the register changes completely. The courtyard opens up soft and green. There's a Tudor house grafted onto the Norman bones, a great hall, terraced gardens falling away toward the valley. One 19th century visitor loved it so much he kept coming back. Charles Dickens, a close friend of the family who lived here then. Rockingham is widely thought to be the model for Chesney Wold, the great brooding house in Bleak House. Treat that as a well-loved literary tradition, rather than a fact Dickens ever signed his name to. Here's what Rockingham sets up for everything that follows. A gate built to hold a hill against an army now opens onto a family's Sunday. The portcullis slot is still there in the stone above your head. Nobody has ever needed to drop it. And that gap between what the gate was for and what it protects now only gets stranger from here. Because the next one has a moat, and a room built specifically so that no one could hear what was being planned inside it. 9. Broughton Castle, Oxfordshire. You approach this one across water. Broughton sits low in a hollow near Bamburgh, wrapped in a moat fed by 3 separate streams. 3 acres of still brown water with the house floating in the middle of it, built of a local ironstone that turns honey gold when the sun hits it. There's no dramatic hilltop here, no cliff, just a bridge and a battlemented gatehouse at the end of it, and the quiet sense that you were crossing a threshold you weren't necessarily invited to cross. The core of the house was built around the year 1300 by a knight named Sir John de Broughton. That's where the name comes from. The gatehouse you crossed to reach it came a little later, added in the early 1400s, when Sir Thomas Wickham took out a royal licence to crenellate, to fortify, to add battlements, in 1406. That single legal permission is what let a manor house start calling itself a castle. And in 1448, through a marriage, the whole place passed to a family whose name is still on the door. The Fiennes family, the Lords Say and Seal. They have held Broughton ever since. It is, right now, the home of Martin Fiennes and his family, the same bloodline, unbroken, for the better part of 600 years. Now the room. Climb a spiral stair to the very top of the house and you reach a small, plain chamber that the family have long called the room that has no ears. In the years before the Civil War, its owner, William Fiennes, the first Viscount Say and Seal, nicknamed Old Subtlety, was one of the most determined enemies of King Charles I in the whole country. And men who opposed the king needed somewhere to talk, where a servant couldn't be listening at the door. Documented figures of the coming war met up here, quietly, under the cover of ordinary business. John Pym, John Hampden, the hard core of the parliamentary opposition. A rebellion, part planned, at the top of a family staircase. The war came to the gate soon enough. After the Battle of Edgehill in 1642, fought only a few miles away, Royalist forces besieged Broughton and took it. You can still read the aftermath in the stone. A date, 1655, cut into the gatehouse to mark the repairs. Damage recorded not in an archive, but in the wall itself. Much of the interior you'd see today was rebuilt grandly in the 1550s, all panelled rooms and moulded plaster ceilings. And if the place feels oddly familiar even on a first visit, there's a reason. Its atmosphere has made it a favourite of film and television crews, standing in for the Tudor world in productions like Shakespeare in Love and Wolf Hall. But strip the cameras away and it's simpler than all that. A moat, a gate, a staircase, to a room built for secrets, and a family still sleeping above it, 4 centuries after the plotting stopped. The next gate keeps a far darker secret, and this one is written into the history books. 8. Berkeley Castle, Gloucestershire. Some houses are beautiful. This one is beautiful, and it makes your skin crawl. And it does both at the same time, in the same rooms, and you cannot separate the two. Berkeley stands in Gloucestershire, low and pink-grey and enormous. And it holds a record that no other family home in England can match. It has been lived in by the same family, the Berkeleys, for over 850 years. The keep was begun in the 12th century, around 1153, on the orders of Henry II to hold the line against the Welsh. Descendants of the man who built it are still here. It is generally regarded as the oldest castle in England continuously occupied by a single family. Not restored back into use, not reopened, never left. You enter through the gate, past defences that once had to be taken seriously. The breach, smashed through the outer wall by parliamentarian cannon during the Civil War, is still there, deliberately never repaired. A wound the family chose to keep. And then you go deeper, into the keep, and you come to the reason most people have heard of this place at all. In 1327, a king was brought here to die. Edward II had been deposed by his own wife, Queen Isabella, and her ally, Roger Mortimer. To keep him out of the reach of anyone who might free him, they had him locked in Berkeley Castle, in the keep, under the charge of Thomas de Berkeley. He was held from April to September of that year, and on the 21st of September, 1327, Edward II died in this building. Now here is where I have to be careful with you, because the most famous version of this story is exactly that, a story. You will hear that the king was killed with a red-hot iron, in a way too grim to describe, chosen to leave no mark on the body. That gruesome detail comes from a chronicler writing years later, Geoffrey Le Baker, and historians treat it with real suspicion. Some argue he was smothered. A few have argued, seriously, that he didn't die here at all, and that another man's body was buried in his place. What is documented is that Edward II was imprisoned at Berkeley, and that he died in 1327. The red-hot poker is legend. Believe the walls, be careful with the poker. They still show you the cell, a small, thick-walled room beside a deep shaft of a dungeon, into which, according to the castle's own long-told tradition, rotting carcasses were thrown, so that the stench alone might sicken a prisoner to death. Even happier visitors leave a mark. Queen Elizabeth I is said to have played bowls here on a visit. Said to. Mark that one too. And through all of it, the murder, the siege, the centuries, a family has gone on living, eating in the Great Hall, sleeping upstairs. The medieval kitchens still standing, the archives running back 800 years, the town outside the gate aging alongside the people within it. That is the thing about Berkeley that stays with you. The horror is real and documented, and so is the breakfast, every morning, for nearly 9 centuries. Now we go north, to a gate where the ghosts outnumber the living, and the herd of white cattle has been watching the walls for 800 years. 7. Chillingham Castle, Northumberland. Come at this one late in the day, when the light is going, and you'll understand its reputation before anyone says a word. Chillingham sits deep in the Northumberland countryside, a square, grey, 4-towered fortress that has spent most of its life staring toward the Scottish border and expecting trouble from it. The Grey family took on the estate in the 13th century, around 1246, and the castle itself was fortified into its serious defensive shape in the mid-1300s. This was a front-line building. In 1298, King Edward I stopped here on his way north to fight a Scottish army led by William Wallace. You are standing where Longshanks slept the night before he marched on Wallace. For centuries the Greys held it, and their descendants, the Earls of Tankerville, after them, right through until the 1980s. And then it very nearly died. By the time it changed hands, it had slid toward ruin. Roofless in places, decaying. It was rescued by Sir Humphrey Wakefield, whose wife is a Grey by descent, so that even now the old bloodline is threaded back into the walls. He began hauling it back from the edge in the 1980s, and much of what you see standing today is thanks to that restoration. Then there's the park. Outside the walls, in 600 acres of ancient grassland, roams a herd of wild white cattle. Pale, horned, watchful animals that have lived enclosed on this land since the park wall went up around 1220. They are, according to the Chillingham Wild Cattle Association, who keep their records, the only surviving wild herd of their kind in the world, kept apart and unmixed for so many centuries that they've become something you can't find anywhere else on Earth. 800 years of the same animals, grazing under the same walls. There is almost nothing in England as strange to stand near. And now the part everyone wants, and the part I have to fence off carefully. Chillingham has a formidable reputation as one of the most haunted castles in the country. Tales of a glowing boy, a grey lady, a torture chamber below. I want to be straight with you. These are ghost stories and dark folklore, told and retold, and very good for a shiver. They are not documented history, and I'm not going to hand them to you as if they were. What is real is quieter and honestly eerier for it. A genuinely medieval fortress, hauled back from the dead, lived in again, sitting in the dusk above a herd of white animals older than most nations. You pass in through the gate. A family lives inside these walls tonight, and the cattle watch the stone the way they've watched it since before the castle was even finished. Now we go grander, because the next gate belongs to a fortress where an actual rebellion against the crown was hatched in the Great Hall, and the family who bought the place afterward have never left. 6. Raby Castle, County Durham. There are castles that pretend to be fortresses, and there are fortresses that never learn to pretend. Raby is the second kind. It rises out of a 200-acre deer park in County Durham. 9 great towers linked by high curtain walls. The whole thing so complete and so martial that your eye keeps searching for a weakness and not finding one. It was built in the late 14th century, roughly between 1367 and 1390, by John Neville, the 3rd Baron Neville de Raby, who took out a licence to fortify the place in 1378. The Nevilles were, for a time, one of the mightiest families in the north of England. This gate was built to say so. You can still drive a carriage straight in through the gatehouse and into the courtyard. The entrance was made to swallow horses and vehicles whole, and inside is the Baron's Hall. an enormous chamber that once, by long tradition, could hold hundreds of armed men. It was in this hall, in 1569, that one of the great gambles of Tudor England was set in motion. Charles Neville and his allies met here and planned the Rising of the North, an armed attempt to topple Queen Elizabeth I and put Mary, Queen of Scots, in her place. It failed, catastrophically. Neville fled into exile, the rebellion collapsed, and the crown seized Raby and everything the family owned. The gate that had been theirs for generations was suddenly forfeit. For more than 40 years, the castle sat in royal hands. Then, in 1626, a courtier named Sir Henry Vane the Elder bought it outright. And the Vane family, who hold the title Lord Barnard, are still here, still living inside the walls of the fortress that once plotted against the Queen. There's a lovely thread in this too. The present family, through the female line, carry a link back to the very Nevilles who built the place, so the blood that raised these towers hasn't entirely left them. One more thing worth knowing, because it puts the age of the stone into human focus. Cecily Neville was born inside these walls. The woman who would become the mother of two kings of England, Edward IV and Richard III. Before there were Tudors on the throne at all, a future royal mother drew her first breath behind this gate. Raby has ghost stories, of course. A headless Vane, a former Lady Barnard said to stalk the halls. Enjoy them as the folklore they are. The records don't vouch for them. Now stay with me, because the last 5 are where this gets genuinely hard to believe. The next one is my favourite gate in England, and almost nobody has stood in front of it, because the family who live there keep it shut. 5. Maxstoke Castle, Warwickshire. Some places survive by being famous. This one survived by being private, and it is very nearly perfect. Maxstoke sits in the flat Warwickshire countryside, low-walled, inconspicuous, guarding nothing in particular except itself. And that modesty is exactly why it's still whole. It's a near-perfect square, about 60 yards on a side, with an octagonal tower at each corner, a central gatehouse in the east wall, and a broad moat of moving water wrapped the whole way round. There was a drawbridge once. You reach the gate across the water and step through into a courtyard. And the sensation is of walking into a photograph of the 14th century that nobody ever got round to updating. The date is what makes people stop. Maxstoke was licensed to crenellate in February 1345, built for Sir William de Clinton, and it has, in the words of the architectural historians who've studied it, hardly been touched. A rare example of a complete castle raised in a single period to a single plan and then simply kept. Look up at the gatehouse and you'll see a clock with only one hand, chiming the hour. The family gardener still winds it by hand every week. That is the scale of continuity we're talking about. And here is the detail that makes Maxstoke the beating heart of this whole list. Before England had a Tudor king, the woman who would create the Tudor dynasty lived behind this gate. Margaret Beaufort, mother of the future Henry VII, spent time here with her husband Sir Henry Stafford in the years when the crown was still anyone's to seize. The gate is genuinely, provably pre-Tudor. The mother of the first Tudor once walked in through it. You could not write a more exact fit to the title if you tried. Who lives here now? The Featherstone Dilke family. The Dilkes bought Maxstoke in 1599, and their descendants have lived inside these medieval walls, more or less without a break, for over 400 years. It is one of the oldest privately owned, continuously inhabited castles in the country. And it is a home, first and last. It isn't a tourist machine. The family open the gate to the public barely one day a year, in support of the National Garden Scheme, and otherwise it stays closed, lived in, quiet. That's why you've probably never seen inside it. There's no gift shop, no car park queue, no floodlights. Just a family, a moat, a one-handed clock, and 700 years of the same square walls. When people talk about a castle being frozen in time, they usually mean it loosely. Maxstoke means it literally. The past didn't get preserved here by an Act of Parliament or a heritage grant. It survived because someone kept living in it, and never once decided to tear it down. Now we swing to the opposite extreme. The next gate isn't hidden at all. It's one of the most photographed fortresses on Earth. It stands on a rock over the sea, and its story starts before England had a name. 4. Bamburgh Castle, Northumberland. You see this one from miles away, and it doesn't look like a building. It looks like the rock decided to grow battlements. Bamburgh stands on a crag of black volcanic stone on the Northumberland coast. Sheer on 3 sides, the North Sea hammering the fourth. 9 acres of fortress strung out along the top of it. It is one of the largest inhabited castles in the country, and its history runs so far back that the Normans, who most of this list treats as ancient, are relative latecomers. This was a royal capital before England existed as a single kingdom. The first written record of the stronghold here dates to the year 547, when an Anglo-Saxon king named Ida seized the rock and made it the seat of his kingdom, Bernicia. The old name for the place, Bebbanburgh, is said to come from a later queen, Bebba. Saxon kings ruled a swathe of northern Britain from this crag, while the rest of England was still a scatter of warring realms. When you stand at Bamburgh's Gate, you are standing at one of the oldest continuously significant fortresses in the whole country. The Normans came, as they always did, and built in stone. After 1095, a new Norman castle rose on the rock, and its great keep, the square heart of the place, was completed in the 12th century. The original medieval entrance, St Oswald's Gate, still cuts through the western wall, worn and low. And Bamburgh holds one grim distinction that historians genuinely argue over. During the Wars of the Roses, it is often described as the first English castle to be battered into surrender by gunpowder artillery. The moment the age of high stone walls started, slowly, to end. By the 19th century, all that history had half fallen down, and then a very Victorian kind of saviour arrived, William Armstrong, an industrialist and engineer of enormous wealth, a man who built ships and guns and hydraulic machines, bought the castle in 1894 and poured a fortune into restoring it. His family, the Armstrongs, still own Bamburgh and still live within it as their private seat more than a century later. So much of what you photograph today is Armstrong's Victorian vision rebuilt on Saxon and Norman bones. And that's worth saying plainly, rather than pretending the whole thing is untouched. You'll recognise the silhouette even if you've never been. It's a favourite of filmmakers, standing in most famously as the fortress of Bebbanburgh in The Last Kingdom, which is a lovely circle, because Bebbanburgh is simply the real, ancient name of the very rock they're filming on. A Saxon throne, a Norman keep, a Victorian rescue, and a family, still, tonight, living in the wind above the sea on the oldest royal rock in England. Now we drop the scale right down again to a marsh, a musician, and a gatehouse built for the very weapon that would one day make gatehouses obsolete. 3. Ripley Castle, North Yorkshire. Here's a thought to hold as you walk up to this one. The gatehouse in front of you isn't a monument or an exhibit or a ruin behind a rope. It's somebody's flat. Ripley sits in its own estate village a few miles north of Harrogate in North Yorkshire, and it holds one of the most extraordinary continuity records in the entire country. The estate came to the Ingleby family in 1308 in the dowry of an heiress named Edeline Thwenge when she married Sir Thomas Ingleby, and the Inglebys have lived here ever since, over 700 years. They're reckoned to be one of the oldest families in England still occupying the same home. 7 centuries of the same name, on the same land, walking through the same gate. And what a gate! The castle's gatehouse was completed in 1450, 35 years before the Battle of Bosworth, comfortably before there was a Tudor anywhere near the throne. It was built by Sir John Ingleby, a man whose own life reads like a medieval morality tale. He raised this stone gatehouse, married a great heiress, and then gave the lot up to become a monk. The gatehouse he left behind is still here, still whole, and today it's an apartment, a working front door in a 500-year-old fortress, a home tucked inside the gate that once guarded the home. The family who built it were never far from danger, and you can still read that on the walls. The Ingleby's were a Catholic family in a Protestant age, and hidden somewhere in the castle is a priest hole, a concealed space for sheltering a hunted priest that lay forgotten until it was stumbled on by chance in the 1960s. And on the gatehouse itself are marks the guides will point out, pockmarks in the stone, said to be musket ball holes from the Civil War, when parliamentarian troops came through Ripley after the Great Battle of Marston Moor in 1644. That battle produced the castle's most famous story, and I'll give it to you as exactly what it is: the family's celebrated tradition, rather than a courtroom fact. After Marston Moor, Oliver Cromwell himself is said to have spent a night at Ripley, and to have been kept under the eye and, the story goes, the pistol, of an Ingleby daughter remembered as Trooper Jane, who sat up until dawn in the library rather than let the man out of her sight. Believe as much of the pistol as you like. The library is real, and so is the family's long memory of that night. There's a boar's head in the family crest too, with a genuinely documented reason behind it. And earlier, Sir Thomas Ingleby saved King Edward III from a charging wild boar while the king was out hunting and was knighted for it. These are people whose stories are stitched straight into the history of the crown. I'll be straight with you about one thing, because these lists only work if they stay honest. In recent years, the estate has been put up for sale after 7 unbroken centuries. As things stand, the Inglebys are still here, still inside the walls. But Ripley may be living through the first great change in 700 years, even as you watch this. Now we swing to the opposite extreme. From a family's flat in a Yorkshire gatehouse to a fortress on a rock above the sea, older than England itself. 2. Alnwick Castle, Northumberland. If Bamburgh is the oldest rock, Alnwick is the one that never stopped being powerful. A fortress so complete and so lived in that it's often called the second largest inhabited castle in the country, behind only Windsor. It sits above the River Aln in Northumberland, and it was already an old, serious castle in 1309 when a warrior named Henry de Percy bought it from the Bishop of Durham. That purchase began one of the longest and most formidable family stories in England. The Percy family, later the Earls and then the Dukes of Northumberland, have lived at Alnwick almost continuously ever since. 700 years and more, in one castle, one family. And they built for war, because they had to. Alnwick guarded the road against the Scots, and the Percys turned it into a machine for holding the border. Henry de Percy and his son threw up strong towers and a well-defended curtain wall. The second Lord Percy raised 2 tall gatehouse towers that still stand today, decorated with carved shields and, extraordinarily, with stone figures of soldiers along the battlements, frozen forever at their posts. By the 1440s, a huge barbican, an outer gatehouse, a killing ground of obstacles between you and the real door, was added to protect the main entrance. This was the family, quite literally, building a wall around their wall. The Percys were never far from the centre of English history. It was a Percy, Sir Henry, nicknamed Hotspur, who helped raise a rebellion against a king at the end of the 14th century. The same fiery Hotspur who later stalked the pages of Shakespeare. This gate belonged to people who made and unmade monarchs. Come the 18th and 19th centuries, the family turned the fortress into a palace. Great designers were brought in. Capability Brown remade the landscape, and Victorian craftsmen filled the interiors with a grandeur that would have baffled the medieval Percys. So be clear-eyed about what you're seeing. The shell, and the gate towers, and the barbican are genuinely medieval, built centuries before the Tudors. A great deal of the inside is a much later reimagining of what a duke's home should be. You'll almost certainly recognise it, because the world knows Alnwick by another name. Its courtyards and walls became Hogwarts in the first Harry Potter films. It's turned up in Downton Abbey and countless others. Millions have seen this gate on a screen. But here's what the screen doesn't tell you. When the cameras leave, the family is still here. The present Duke of Northumberland and his family live at Alnwick as their home. The private apartments Henry de Percy first laid out in 1309 are, in essence, still in use. Behind the film set, behind the tour route, someone comes home through that medieval gate at the end of the day. the way a Percy has for over 7 centuries. Which brings us, at last, to number 1. A gate that has done exactly one job without a single break since before England had a parliament: guard a home. And it is still doing it tonight. 1. Arundel Castle, West Sussex. Everything on this list has been about survival. This is the purest example of it in England. And once you understand the number attached to it, the rest of the country's castles start to look young. Arundel rises on a hill in West Sussex, above the River Arun and the South Downs. A vast, pale sprawl of towers and walls that seems to belong more to legend than to a real address you could post a letter to. And its oldest feature is not a hall or a keep. It's the mound and the gate. The motte, the great artificial hill at the castle's heart, was raised in 1068, in the raw first years after the Norman conquest, and the stone gatehouse went up around 1070, which makes it one of the very earliest stone castle defences anywhere in England. In front of it, a barbican was added in 1295 to shield that ancient gate behind an even harder one. So here is the number. That gate has stood for roughly 950 years, and Arundel has been the seat of one family and their ancestors, descending generation after generation, sometimes through daughters when the sons ran out, but never breaking the thread, for over 850 of them. The line runs from the Norman D'Albines to the FitzAlans to the Howards, and it is unbroken. Today, Arundel is the home of the Duke of Norfolk, the FitzAlan Howards, the premier dukes of England. And when the Duke is in residence, his standard flies from the tower, exactly as a banner has flown from this castle across the reigns of more than 30 monarchs. Walk up to the gatehouse and let the arithmetic land. When this gate was new, the Doomsday Book had not yet been written. Every English king and queen you can name, every single one from the medieval warlords through the Tudors, the Stuarts, the whole long line to the present day, has reigned during the lifetime of this one doorway. It watched the Wars of the Roses. It was besieged and battered by Parliament's guns in the Civil War of the 1640s. It saw the family rise to the highest rank in the land, and it saw them fall. The 4th Duke beheaded, others imprisoned in the tower for their faith. And still it stood, and still they came back to it. I'll be honest about the fabric, as I've tried to be all the way through. A great deal of what you see rising above the medieval gate is a magnificent 19th century rebuilding, when later dukes remade Arundel as a grand family palace. But the motte from 1068, the gatehouse from 1070, the barbican from 1295, those are the real ancient bones. And they have done nothing for 9.5 centuries, except guard the people who live inside. That is the whole point of this list. Standing in a single building. This gate was designed to keep an army out, and what it has actually done, every day for nearly 1,000 years, is let a family in. Look again at what every gate on this list was built to do. The portcullis, the moat, the murder holes, the barbican thrown up because one gate wasn't frightening enough. All of it engineered around a single assumption, that one day, someone would come to kill the people inside. For almost all of them, that day never came. What came instead was breakfast, the school run, Christmas, a gardener winding a one-handed clock. And here is the secret behind all 10. A gate only survives if someone keeps walking through it. The moment a family leaves, the ivy comes and the roof goes. But the Berkeleys never left Berkeley. The Percys never left Alnwick. The Howards never left Arundel. Occupation is the preservative, not heritage law, just a door somebody still closes at night. So, could you actually sleep behind a portcullis? In a house where a king was murdered or a rebellion was planned? Tell me in the comments, which one would you move into tomorrow? And which one wouldn't you spend a single night inside? Berkeley with its cell? Chillingham in the dark? If this changed how you see England, subscribe. We don't stop at the gate, we go through it.